The morning sun broke across the Australian outback as Captain Rebecca Torres stood on the observation platform of Earth's primary salvage depot. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her military jacket hanging loose on her frame after another sleepless night. Beside her, Chief Engineer David Park adjusted his glasses, squinting at the descending vessels through the red dust that perpetually hung in the air. 6 massive Kryn transport ships broke through the atmosphere. Their hulls shimmered with that characteristic opalescent sheen that human metallurgists still couldn't replicate. Rebecca had seen this show before, 3 times in the past decade, and each time the excitement in her chest died a little faster. These weren't rescue ships. They weren't bringing advanced weapons, medical technology, or the faster-than-light communications array Earth had been requesting for years. They were garbage trucks, nothing more. The ships landed with surprising grace for their enormous size, sending up clouds of red dust that temporarily obscured the depot. When the air cleared, their cargo ramps were already lowering. What emerged made David let out a long, tired sigh. Conveyor systems began dumping their loads onto designated receiving areas. Warped hull plates bearing scorch marks from weapons fire. Shattered power conduits sparking with residual energy. Navigation systems with cracked displays and corroded circuits. Weapons batteries that looked like they'd been pulled from vessels headed for the scrapyard 50 years ago. Everything was broken, outdated, or barely functional. It was refuse from a dozen different species, the unwanted remnants of military vessels that had outlived their usefulness. Ambassador Kelvroth approached from behind, his 3-jointed legs clicking against the metal platform. The Kryn diplomat was tall and insectoid, his compound eyes reflecting the morning light in unsettling ways. His translator box hung from his thorax, producing that flat, emotionless voice that all the alien ambassadors seemed to favor. Humanity should express gratitude for the Galactic Council's continued generosity, he said. This shipment represents significant resources that would otherwise be lost to recycling facilities. Rebecca turned to face him, keeping her expression neutral despite the anger building in her stomach. You call this generosity? Kelvroth's mandibles clicked together in what might have been amusement. Your species has been spacefaring for merely 18 years. The Council cannot justify providing cutting-edge technology to such an inexperienced civilization. This surplus material is appropriate for your current capabilities. David stepped forward, his tablet already analyzing the incoming cargo. I count components from 7 different species here. Kryn, Volex, Talaxian, Hectern, Drosh, Mexian, and something with a power signature I've never encountered. Kelvroth's compound eyes swiveled toward him. Your powers of observation are adequate. When Council species decommission their military vessels, valuable components are salvaged and repurposed. What remains is deemed suitable for lesser civilizations. Earth receives these materials as an act of goodwill. Lesser civilizations, Rebecca repeated, her voice flat. Indeed, the Council estimates that from this shipment, humanity should be capable of constructing perhaps 4 or 5 patrol vessels of acceptable quality. In time, when your species has proven itself more trustworthy and capable, better materials may be provided. Rebecca looked past him at the mountains of scrap accumulating below. 4 or 5 patrol vessels, from enough surplus to have built a dozen warships for any of the Council races. And mathematics was not lost on her. We appreciate the Council's generosity, she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. Kelvroth's translator emitted a sound that might have been satisfaction. I shall convey your gratitude. Use these materials wisely, Captain Torres. Perhaps in another generation, humanity will be ready for more substantive contributions to galactic security. He turned and walked away, his legs carrying him toward the waiting diplomatic shuttle with that peculiar insect grace. David watched him go, his hands clenched around his tablet. They think we are children playing with blocks, he said quietly. Rebecca didn't answer. She was staring at the scrap below, her mind already working. Around them, the depot's human workers had begun the sorting process, separating materials by type and origin. It was back-breaking work that would take weeks. Most of what they received would need extensive repairs before it could even be tested, let alone integrated into any kind of functional vessel. She thought about the colony on Europa, still waiting for the defense satellites that Earth couldn't afford to build with its limited resources. She thought about the mining outposts in the asteroid belt, vulnerable to pirate raids because humanity could barely maintain a handful of patrol ships. She thought about the Council's smug assurances that Earth wasn't ready, that humans were too primitive, too aggressive, too unpredictable to be trusted with real technology. David touched her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" Rebecca smiled, and there was something sharp in it. "I'm thinking that they have made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "They assume we'll do what they expect. Build a few patrol ships, maybe upgrade some existing vessels, and stay in our assigned place as the galaxy's newest charity case." David studied her face. But humans didn't get to space by following instructions, David. We got here by taking things that shouldn't work and making them work anyway. We got here by being too stubborn to accept our limitations." Rebecca pointed at the scrap below, at the twisted metal and burnt circuits and shattered systems from 7 different alien civilizations. "They see garbage. I see possibility. They think they're giving us table scraps, but what they don't understand is that humans have been making miracles out of scraps since we first climbed down from the trees." David followed her gaze, and slowly, understanding began to dawn in his eyes. "You want to use all of it?" he said. "Every piece. Everything they've given us over the years. Everything they will give us in the future. Not to build what they expect," she replied, her voice firm, "but to build something they cannot imagine. Something they have never seen before, because they read too locked into their own ways of thinking." Rebecca nodded. "The council species each have their own technology, their own design philosophies. They don't mix systems because it's inefficient, because it violates their standards and protocols. But we don't have standards yet, David. We don't have protocols. We have desperation and creativity and a whole lot of alien junk that no one else wants." "Exactly what are you proposing?" "I am proposing that we stop trying to be like them and start being ourselves. I am proposing that we take every incompatible, broken, outdated piece of technology they have dumped on us and forge it into something new, something uniquely human." The sun climbed higher as they stood there, looking down at what the galaxy had dismissed as worthless. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were standing at the beginning of something that would change everything. The Council had given Earth its scraps, never imagining that from those scraps, humanity would build a legend. 6 months after the last shipment, deep beneath the sands of an Australian facility, a hidden construction bay hummed with impossible activity. I'm Rebecca Torres, and I was walking through this massive underground complex, watching teams of our best engineers and technicians work on what we officially called the Prometheus Initiative. Unofficially, everyone called it the Frankenstein, and honestly, I couldn't really blame them. David Park met me at the central platform, looking even more disheveled than usual. His jacket was stained with coolant fluid, and it was obvious he'd forgotten to sleep again. "You need to see this," he said, pulling me toward the main assembly area. What stood before us defied every known principle of starship design. The frame was built from salvaged Hectorn battle cruiser hulls, chosen for their incredible durability, scorch marks, and all. Welded into that frame were Kryn power nodes, Vorlex shield generators, Talaxian weapons mounts, and Drosh engine components. It shouldn't have worked. Every engineering textbook from every council species said it was impossible. Different technologies run on different principles, use different power systems, need different controls. Mixing them wasn't just inefficient. It was supposed to be a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. Except it wasn't, because I was looking right at it. "How did you solve the power regulation problem?" I asked. David shook his head. We didn't solve it. We bypassed it. Instead of trying to force the Kryn nodes to play nice with Vorlex generators, we used Mexian coupling systems as intermediaries. They're crude, but they can handle the variance. We're losing about 15% efficiency, but the system is stable. I walked around the skeletal structure, marveling at how human ingenuity had bridged gaps that alien engineers, with all their advanced knowledge, would never have even considered. We used welding techniques from deep-sea construction to join materials that were never meant to touch. Cooling systems designed for Earth's old nuclear submarines were now keeping incompatible alien power cores from melting down. We even salvaged fiber optic networks from decommissioned satellites to create communication pathways between systems that spoke entirely different machine languages. Just then, Lieutenant James Chun approached, holding a datapad with the latest test results. "Captain, we've completed the third firing test on the primary weapon array." I raised an eyebrow. "The one you built from 4 different species gun systems?" Chun couldn't hide his grin. "The very same. It works. Not only does it work, but it generates about 30% more destructive power than any single one of those systems should be capable of producing." "That's impossible," I said automatically. Then I laughed. "That's impossible, which is apparently our specialty now. Show me the numbers." For the next hour, I pored over reports from every section. The shield generators, a bizarre mix of Vorlex emitters and Talaxian power modulators, created a defensive field that shifted frequencies so rapidly it confused targeting systems. The engines, a nightmarish combination of Drosh fusion drives and Kryn gravity manipulators, could theoretically achieve speeds far beyond what any single system could manage. The hull itself, layered with ablative armor from 3 different sources, proved resistant to weapon types that should have sliced right through it. Every system was a compromise, a jury-rigged solution that broke all the established rules. And every single one of them worked better than it had any right to. Later, I found David in the command center mock-up, staring at holographic displays of power flow simulations. "Do you know what we've built?" I asked him. "A warship that will probably explode the first time we take it into real combat," he replied without looking away. I stood beside him. "We've built something none of them could build. Not because they lack the technology, but because they lack the perspective. They've been traveling the stars for thousands of years, David," I continued. "They have rules, traditions, established methods that work perfectly well. Why would they ever think to do things differently?" He finally turned to look at me. "And we've been in space for less than 2 decades. We don't know what's impossible yet, so we just keep doing impossible things." "Exactly," I said, gesturing at the designs around us. "Every species in the Council builds their ships according to their own philosophy. The Kryn are all about modular efficiency. The Vorlex prioritize defense. The Talaxians focus on overwhelming firepower. But humans? We're scavengers, David. We take whatever works and we adapt it. That's always been our greatest strength." Over the following months, the Prometheus truly took shape. The crew selection process was intense, drawing volunteers from every branch of Earth's defense forces. They all knew the risks. They knew they'd be flying a vessel that had never been tested in real combat, a ship that could fail catastrophically at any moment. And they came anyway. There was Lieutenant Sofia Rodriguez, a pilot who had flown rescue missions through asteroid fields that would have killed anyone with more sense than courage. There was Dr. Timothy Walsh, a physicist who spent 5 years reverse engineering Kryn sensors and still claimed he only understood about 30% of how they worked. And Commander Patricia Stone, a tactical officer who had trained on every human combat ship in service and now had to learn systems no human had ever used before. I watched them work together, solving problems that shouldn't have had solutions. When the Talaxian targeting computers refused to interface with the Hectorn fire control, Rodriguez wrote a translation program in 3 days that should have taken 3 months. When the power distribution network kept overloading, Walsh redesigned the entire flow architecture using principles he half invented and half borrowed from alien tech that had never been meant to coexist. Then came the Council's monthly check-in. Ambassador Kelvroth arrived with his usual entourage, touring the public sections of the facility where our official, Council-approved projects were on display. I showed him the 4 little patrol vessels we had constructed, exactly as the Council had expected us to. "Adequate work," Kelvroth said, his translator conveying a sort of polite, condescending approval. "These vessels should serve Earth's defense needs for the immediate future. The Council is pleased to see humanity making appropriate use of the materials provided." I just smiled and nodded, saying nothing about the massive construction, base 600 meters below our feet, where the Prometheus waited in the darkness. After the ambassador left, I went straight back underground. David was waiting for me, with the news I'd been anticipating. "We're ready for the first full systems test. Everything is online. The reactor is stable, the weapons are charged, and the engines are ready." I looked up at the incredible vessel we had built from the galaxy's unwanted refuse. It wasn't beautiful by any conventional standard. The hull was a patchwork of different materials and colors. The weapon arrays jutted out at angles that defied any sense of symmetry. The engine nacelles were mismatched, adapted from components that were never meant to work together. But there was something truly magnificent about it, something that spoke to that stubborn human refusal to accept limitations, to bow to expectations, to stay in our assigned place. "When do we launch?" I asked. David just grinned. "Whenever you give the order, Captain." The message arrived just 3 weeks before the Prometheus was scheduled for its first real space trial. It was a distress call from the mining colony on Vesta, an asteroid nestled between Mars and Jupiter. Pirates had attacked the facility, but these weren't your usual opportunistic raiders. They were Threxian corsairs, flying decommissioned military ships that were still leagues ahead of anything Earth had in active service. Rebecca stood in the operations center, the fragmented transmissions crackling in her ears. The colony's defensive satellites had been wiped out in the first few minutes. Their emergency bunkers would hold for maybe 6 hours before the Threxians sliced through. The nearest Earth patrol was a grueling 14 hours away. The Council had been notified, of course, but their response was as predictable as it was cold. Unfortunate, but Vesta is outside our protection zones. Earth must handle its own colonial defense. David found her staring at the tactical display, her reflection a ghost on the screen. "You're thinking about it," he said. It wasn't a question. "We're not ready, Rebecca. We've barely completed basic systems integration. Half the weapons arrays haven't even been fired outside of simulations. The shield generators might buckle under sustained fire." "I know," she replied, her voice low. "And you're still thinking about it." Rebecca turned to face her chief engineer, her gaze unwavering. 237 people are on that colony, David. Miners, technicians, families. They went out there because we promised them we could protect them. We told them Earth was finally becoming a real spacefaring civilization. What does it say about us if we abandon them just because our warship isn't quite perfect yet? He studied her for a long moment, the hum of the command center filling the silence. Then, a slow, deliberate nod. "I'll start pre-flight preparations. Get the crew on board." 20 minutes later, she assembled them in the Prometheus command center. 43 men and women who had volunteered for an experimental vessel, expecting months of mundane testing before seeing any real action. Instead, she was asking them to fly headfirst into combat, in a ship that might just come apart around them. Lieutenant Rodriguez, her helmsman, spoke first. "How many people on Vesta, Captain?" 237, Rebecca answered. "Then we go." No debate, no hesitation. Across the bridge, heads nodded in silent, resolute agreement. The Prometheus launched from its hidden bay, a specter rising through a concealed shaft that emerged in the desert, 50 kilometers from the main facility. A council's monitoring systems flagged it as just another standard patrol vessel on a routine flight. They had no idea what was actually burning its way toward the asteroid belt, shattering their own speed specifications. Rebecca settled into the captain's chair, watching displays that flickered with data from 7 different alien systems, all integrated through sheer human stubbornness and creativity. "Commander Stone, what are we facing?" Stone consulted her tactical readout, her voice tight with anger. 3 Threxian Corsair vessels, modified strike craft, heavily armed. They're using Council-grade weapons on civilian targets. Time to intercept? 93 minutes at current speed, Rodriguez reported from the helm. "Captain, I can push the engines harder." The Drosh fusion drives are barely at 60%. Rebecca considered it. The engines had never been tested above 75%. But then again, nothing about the ship had ever been properly tested. "Do it," she commanded. "Bring us to 85%. Let's see what she can really do." The Prometheus surged forward, its mismatched engine system somehow working in perfect, impossible harmony. In the engine room, technicians monitored power flows that defied every manual, making adjustments by pure instinct and experience. They reached Vesta in 71 minutes. The 3 Threxian vessels were in orbit around the asteroid, their weapons systematically carving through the colony's last defenses. They were sleek, deadly ships, built by a species that had plundered this sector for centuries. When they detected the Prometheus approaching, they broke off their attack and turned to face the lone newcomer. The lead Threxian ship opened a channel. Its captain appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features twisted in something like amusement. "An Earth vessel. How quaint. Turn back, humans, and we might let you live. This colony is ours." Rebecca leaned forward, her voice calm but carrying the weight of iron. "This colony is under Earth's protection. Leave now, and we might let you live." The Threxian captain laughed, a harsh, rasping sound that grated on the ears. "You fly in a single ship against 3 of ours. You have no council support. What can you possibly do?" "Stone," Rebecca said quietly, "show them what we can do. Target their lead vessel. Fire when ready." The weapon arrays that should never have worked together opened up in perfect, chaotic synchronization. Talaxian particle beams, Kryn plasma cannons, and Vorlex energy torpedoes, all fired through targeting systems that human engineers had bullied into cooperation. The effect was devastating. The lead Threxian ship's shields collapsed under the first volley, overwhelmed by the sheer variety of weapon frequencies. The second volley tore through its hull, armor designed to resist any single type of weapon, but completely unprepared for the symphony of destruction that hit it. The Threxian vessel spun away, atmosphere bleeding from a dozen breaches. The other 2 ships opened fire, and the Prometheus's shield generators flared to life. The defensive field was unlike anything in standard council tech. It shifted frequencies constantly, adapting to incoming fire, redistributing power to reinforce weak points. The Threxians poured everything they had into it, and the shields held. "Return fire," Rebecca ordered, her voice ringing with authority. "All weapons. Let them see what human engineering can do." What followed was less a battle and more a brutal demonstration. The Prometheus moved with an agility that its size should have made impossible, its mismatched engines providing thrust vectoring that baffled the enemy's targeting systems. Its weapons struck from unexpected angles, with combinations of technologies the Threxians had never seen and couldn't defend against. Its shields absorbed damage that should have crippled it, the system's constant shifting preventing the enemy from ever finding a weakness. Within 15 minutes, all 3 Threxian vessels were drifting, silent hulks. Rebecca had given them multiple chances to retreat. They had refused, blinded by their confidence in superior numbers and technology. They had been wrong. A transmission came from the Vesta colony, the voice choked with relief and disbelief. "Captain Torres, We don't know what kind of ship you're flying, but thank you. Thank you for not abandoning us." Rebecca felt the tension finally drain from her shoulders. She looked around the bridge at her crew, these men and women who had trusted her, who had flown an untested vessel into the heart of the fire because people needed help. "We're heading home," she said. "Commander Stone, send a full report to Earth Defense Command. Let them know the Prometheus is operational." As they burned back toward Earth, David came to stand beside her command chair. "Well," he said with a wry grin, "I guess she works." Rebecca smiled. "She's a patchwork of alien garbage that should never have gotten off the ground, powered by human stubbornness and held together by sheer determination. Of course she works. That's what we do best." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next video. News of the Vesta incident spread through the human colonies faster than any official report. In just 2 days, everyone knew about the strange, powerful warship that had appeared from nowhere to save the mining colony. And within 3, the Galactic Council knew about it too. Ambassador Kelvroth arrived at the Australian facility with an entire delegation of council representatives. His usual condescending tone was gone, replaced by something else. Tension. "Captain Torres," he said, "the council requires a full inspection of the vessel you deployed to Vesta. There are reports of treaty violations, unauthorized military construction, and the use of restricted technologies." Rebecca Torres stood her ground. The Prometheus was constructed entirely from materials the Council provided to Earth. Decommissioned surplus, I believe you called it. Garbage deemed suitable for a lesser civilization. That surplus was for patrol vessels, built under Council supervision, Kelvrath retorted. What you have built violates numerous regulations. Rebecca smiled coldly. Show me which one. Show me where any treaty says Earth can't use the materials we receive however we choose. Show me where it says we need permission to defend our own people. Kelvrath's mandibles clicked rapidly, a clear sign of agitation. You have constructed a warship using technologies from 7 different species. Such integration is impossible. It violates fundamental principles of engineering. And yet it works, David Park said, stepping forward. It saved 237 lives yesterday. It defeated 3 Threxian corsairs without taking any real damage. Impossible or not, Ambassador, the Prometheus exists. The Council delegation insisted on a full inspection. Rebecca allowed it, but with conditions. They could examine the exterior, review the performance data, and interview the crew. But the detailed schematics and critical systems? Those were off limits. The Council's generosity has limits, it seems, she said. As does ours. The inspection took 3 long days. The Council's best engineers walked around the Prometheus in a state somewhere between total confusion and abject horror. A Vorlich specialist stood before the shield generators for 20 minutes, his translator just muttering impossible, impossible, impossible. A Kryn analyst examined the power grid and declared it should have exploded the second it was turned on. A Talaxian weapons expert, after studying the integrated firing arrays, finally had to admit that while it violated every design principle his species held sacred, it was actually more efficient than their own configurations. On the final day, the full delegation assembled in the main conference room. Kelvroth spoke, his condescending tone now completely gone. What you have accomplished is unprecedented, he admitted. Every species in the Council has spent millennia perfecting their own technologies. We have never successfully integrated systems from multiple species. The compatibility issues are just too extreme. That's because you never had to, Rebecca said quietly. You never had to make do with scraps. You never had to take broken pieces from a dozen different sources and forge them into something that works. That has always been humanity's situation, Ambassador. We work with what we have, not with what we wish we had. A Hectorn representative leaned forward. The question is what to do about this. Earth has demonstrated a military capability far beyond what we anticipated. Some members are concerned. Concerned that we can defend ourselves? David asked. Concerned that we don't need your charity anymore? Concerned that we might not stay in our designated role as helpless newcomers? The room fell silent. Finally, a Drosh counselor spoke, her voice soft and measured. Humanity was admitted as a probationary member. Limited tech, restricted military, supervised expansion. These were deemed necessary because your species is young, aggressive, and unpredictable. Rebecca stood, placing her hands flat on the table. Let me tell you what's unpredictable. Unpredictable is sending a civilization your garbage and expecting gratitude. Unpredictable is refusing to help colonies under attack because they're outside your designated zones. Unpredictable is looking at a species that went from atmospheric flight to FTL in less than a century and thinking they'll be content with your limitations forever. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each representative. You gave us scraps because you thought that was all we could handle. You gave us broken, incompatible technologies because you assumed we couldn't use them. You underestimated us because you measured humanity by your standards, not ours. The Prometheus is not a violation of your treaties. It's proof that your assumptions about us were wrong. Kelvrath's compound eyes fixed on her. What is it you want, Captain Torres? She sat back down. Respect. Real technology sharing, not your junk. Equal treatment in council decisions. Protection for all our colonies, not just the ones you deem convenient. And an end to the assumption that because we are new to the stars, we are somehow lesser. The Vorlex representative made a sound that the translator rendered as thoughtful consideration. A vessel you constructed should not function. By all established principles, it is a catastrophic failure. Yet it works, and works well. This suggests that human approaches to engineering and problem-solving are fundamentally different. Perhaps that difference has value. Over the following weeks, negotiations crawled forward. The council was ancient, bound by tradition. But they couldn't ignore the Prometheus. Earth had taken their trash and built something none of them could replicate. That creativity, that sheer stubborn ingenuity, was not something they could just dismiss. 3 months after Vesta, a new treaty was ratified. Earth's probationary status was revised. Technology sharing would increase. Human colonies would receive full council protection. And Earth would be permitted to maintain its own military, constructed however humanity saw fit. Rebecca stood on the observation platform, watching as construction began on 3 more vessels. They weren't copies of the Prometheus, but new designs, each incorporating the lessons learned from that first impossible warship. Each would be unique, a fusion of technologies the other species wouldn't dare combine. David joined her, looking up at the skeletal frameworks. We changed things, didn't we? We proved we belong here, Rebecca agreed. Not because we're like them, but because we're different. Because when they see impossibility, we see an opportunity, he smiled. Because we're really good at making something from nothing. Because we're human, she said. We take what we're given, we adapt, we improve, and we survive. That's what we've always done. From the first tools made of stone and bone to starships built from alien scrap, we endure, we innovate. We refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible. The Prometheus sat in its dock below, scarred but victorious. An ugly patchwork vessel they should never have flown, built from garbage by a species too stubborn to accept its assigned place. It was the most beautiful thing Rebecca had ever seen. In the years that followed, the story of the Prometheus spread. Other species heard about the humans who built a warship from 7 civilizations' trash. Some laughed. Some were impressed. Some were worried. But they all learned the same lesson. Never underestimate humanity. Never assume that because we are new, we lack the capability to surprise you. Never mistake our willingness to work with scraps for an inability to forge those scraps into something magnificent. The council thought they were being generous, giving their garbage to a primitive species. Instead, they had given humanity exactly what it needed: raw materials, diverse technologies, and a challenge. From those gifts, humanity had built not just a warship, but a future. The Prometheus was more than a vessel. It was a statement, a promise, and a warning. Humanity had arrived among the stars, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one.